Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are reaching towards the end of our 2 day, 1.5 day symposium. And one of the sessions that I am really looking forward to is this one, not just because I'm moderating it, but also because this is where we want to look at what's really happening with the current wave of innovation, right? Where are we going from an enterprise innovation perspective, and what is the role of and the power of technology behind it? Right? I think we've been hyping and talking about digital for the last 10 years, for the entire decade, but how many enterprises have truly digitally transformed? We can count them on our fingers, if any, right? And we still see a lot of enterprises continue to limp along, right, papering over their cracks, staying in the same game. uh, and I wanted to talk today about, has the pandemic shock created a new paradigm where technology innovation is critical for survival, and can enterprises really make the change to change the habits, instead of resisting change, embrace change. And what we have done here at HFS is created this enterprise innovation framework, which is essentially across three horizons. I think where we are today is horizon one, digital. And I think digital transformation is really horizon one. You've got to do it today. As of now, it should be done. And I think that's the challenge that we're throwing out to enterprises, because I think digital transformation, the way that we've looked at these three horizons innovation frameworks, is from a scope of innovation, as well as what's the value aspiration. Now, if you look at digital transformation, most of the scope is functional in nature. I want to transform my finance and accounting function, or my logistics function, or my procurement, or I want to improve my IT. And we are still thinking linear, right? We are still thinking in terms of efficiency, effectiveness. How do I get the right workflows that work across my organization, across end-to-end processes? I think horizon two is what one office is all about, right? That's what we've been talking about uh, these entire 1.5 days, where we start to move beyond a functional mindset to an enterprise mindset. That's when we start to talk about, is my enterprise digitally native? Am I cloud native as an organization? And the scope suddenly moves from your function, your silo, to the entire enterprise. And that requires a different mindset altogether. That requires a growth mindset, that requires IT and business to collaborate, that requires data led decision making, that requires IT to know business and business to know IT. And that also requires starts to you need to start to delve into more exciting technology. And then the last, I think, is beyond one office. That's horizon three, and we've started to see that happen as well. And we're calling that hyper connected enterprises, where we start to see collaboration across multiple organizations with common objectives, driving completely new sources of value. Right? And that requires external collaboration, that requires data monetization, that requires completely autonomous processes, and that requires new technologies. Look at what's happening with distributed ledger, look at what's happening with this whole stream of DeFi, or decentralized finance. Just as an example, that was less than $1 billion in market cap about 15 months back, and today it's over $70 billion. In just 12 months. That's what's happened to DeFi. We can't just defy DeFi anymore. The 5G revolution is coming to play. Quantum is not just science fiction. There is stuff happening. So how do enterprises look at innovation, both from a scope perspective, from a value perspective, and also from a technology perspective? That's really what we wanted to talk about in today's conversation, and would love to have uh, panels, my panel, come on screen now, so that we can start to have this conversation. And gentlemen, let's start with quick introductions, maybe, where you can talk about what you do at your organizations, but also to make it interesting, if you can share one thing that really excites you about technology innovation, and one thing that really frustrates you. um, I think that'll make it fun. So, Jason, maybe we start with you.
All right, thanks, Rob. I'll take the first go at it then. So I'm Jason Kelly, and I am the general manager for the IBM strategic partnerships across all of our services business around the world, and have for a number of years led one of our largest ecosystems plays, which is our blockchain business globally. And I would say the exciting part about technology is the excitement we get to see when it works across not one, but multiple clients. And it's the aha moment of, we should have done this a long time ago. And this is so excitingly easy. And as I heard in the prior discussion with Accenture, it's the experience is totally different at that point. Now, just as the joy of that comes into play, it's the frustration of, why didn't you do it earlier? And it's the business processes and all the things that stand in the way of actually implementing that new capability because of the way it's always been done, because of all the silos that stand in the way of actually making it happen. So getting past that, the excitement is right there on the other side.
Thanks, Jason. KK, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi, Kalyan Kumar, call me KK, CTO for HCL Technologies, and also run all our ecosystems and all our ecosystem business units, which includes hyperscalers and tech OEMs across the globe, and also the industry partnerships. Technology, and you asked me what is interesting and what's frustrating. I think it's actually both. The rate of change is actually really impressive because speed at which technology adoption is changing, and especially with cloud and hyper platforms and things around that, your ability to do rate of change is quite good. And that's really important because it's the speed which really matters. But I think the frustrating part is also the rate of change, because people are not, I think, the ability to pace and catch up. In your picture, you talked about Horizon 1 and 2 and 3. I think the 3 is needed now. The challenge we have is this very famous old quote, which I pick on, which is a God made world in 7 days because he had no installed base, correct? And I think the fact is that we all carry and drag this whole large complex installed base. But I think at some point in time, we all have to take hard decisions and tough decisions. And sometimes that people change is slower than technology availability and technology change. I think adopting that quickly, and that's where skills transformation, people mindset change, culture change. It's not that I want to be cloud first, correct? You have to also think cloud native, correct? You have to bring the mindset, the culture. That's where I think it's like a dual pull happening on both sides.
That's a great point, KK. Mike.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So Mike Morris, I am the CEO of Topcoder, a global crowdsourcing platform for software development, data science, and creative design. We are an owned entity by Wipro, and I'm very happy to be here. And so both of these questions, I'll start with the positive. I'm generally an optimist. So what am I excited about in terms of technology innovation? And I think really, to me, it's like this era that we are in with the ability to scale digitally. So I typically think of that because of my background as scaling with a platform, but it's really that, if you can, as we talked about before in the prior session, if you can create an amazing intuitive experience digitally, that ability to scale it and our mindset shift, like we really can go as an organization, as an individual contributor, as a team, you can go from thinking from, hey, I can 2x what I'm doing, 10x, 100x, I can 1000x what I'm doing at no greater, organizational cost. And I think that is what really excites me about, where we are with technology innovation right now. And as digital makes it happen. So what frustrates me, the core of my frustration will typically come from processes and procedures that just suck the ever-living creativity out of a worker. So I think organizations, as they grow, they tend to create more processes and procedures that suck creativity out of people, that reduce flexibility of decision making or autonomy. I personally don't feel like it has to be correlated to the size of an organization. I feel like as organizations grow, they have to change in order to, keep creativity, as part of their culture. But that's probably the biggest thing that frustrates me, is just seeing where creativity is stifled and that inertia is created.
That's great, Mike. And then last but not the least, my partner in crime, Joel.
Thanks, Saurabh. Joel Martin. I am the VP of our cloud research here at HFS. So I won't go into my long assorted past, but I've been on the vendor side, the buyer side, and back on the analyst side. So I've kind of seen and I've been in different shoes, if you will. What excites me the most, honestly, is creation everywhere. Like, it isn't coming just from California these days. Innovation is coming from all over the place. And so that just makes the choice you have culturally, socially, individually about what you can do, it's out there. The biggest frustration, though, and honestly, I think this is why everybody's attending this event, is where do you place your bets? And especially these days, we find ourselves like we are right now, isolated in our four walls. It's what technology is going to move, my business objectives forward, which one's going to captivate and build on the culture of my organization so that it's sustainable. Jason, KK, Mike, you all talked about it. It's that inherent, we've been doing this for so long, and now there's new technologies out there. Which ones are the best ones for me to place my bets? That's my biggest frustration as a buyer, and then as an analyst, working with folks, is figuring out which ones are going to bring value.
Yeah. So Joel, I know those are all great points. And Joel, maybe I'll ask you the first question, right? Because you've been trying to analyze this space, and we just completed this big study of 800 different respondents across the Global 2000, and I think even if you heard the opening remarks by KK, Jason, and Mike, the challenge and the frustration is not technology itself. The challenge is people, process, culture. It's not inherently technology. Why do you think we're still struggling to adopt technologies? Take cloud, your favorite subject. We talked about cloud 30 years back, man, and we still are having that same debate, a very vehement debate right now, especially after the pandemic. Why does it take so long? What's the challenge to technology adoption?
I think at the end of the day, it's something to go back to an age-old adage by Sam Palmisano: people do what you incent, not what you expect. And as we roll out these technologies and innovations, we think we've done the right things, but then our people take them and they take them in different directions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And there's as much the how do we get data and tools to our workforce, to our people that are closest to our customers, to do what they're paying us to deliver in terms of our product or service, and are they doing the right things? Are they properly trained? And we saw this honestly in the very first session we had when Phil was talking about digital fluency and how people are still grappling with that, and the lack of a cloud strategy. And then, what is our data strategy, which has come up time and time again in this session. So, we talk about cloud, but I think, just from what I've heard over the last several hours of conversations today and throughout yesterday, was data is so important. We've rolled out all these tools, but are they actually getting the information that they can action? And turning that, delivering on that will allow people to go forward. So whether it's an emerging technology like blockchain, which allows us to work across our hyperconnected ecosystems, whether it's all this accelerated mobility that we've enjoyed just over the last 10 years, it's our people getting the information they need, so they just aren't using technology in the rearview mirror to say, man, I'm glad I made the right decision. It's is the data delivered, and is it available? And I could cite one piece of research that just came out by our colleague Don Ryan, with bad data is killing your business transformation efforts. And that talked, our data in a recent survey, the Global 2000 said 90% of CEOs say data is critical to my organization. Only 5% of them said, I have the right data I need. So if they don't have the right data, how are they then instilling and driving the cultural, the economic, and the social aspects of their organization to move forward and evolve?
So maybe I go to KK. KK, Joel talks about data, and we all talk about wonderful data lakes, but we're living in data swamps. What's been your experience in terms of why do your clients still struggle to adopt emerging or even proven technologies? And KK, you might be on mute.
I think if you really look at the entire landscape, I would really break the customers into two, correct? There are large enterprise corporations who've been there for a long period of time and who've evolved their tech or their IT from MIS and EDP into enterprise IT to where the revolution has happened, correct? So when they go through, and I think the point which also Mike made is that process and procedures and things around that, they are quite deeply embedded into systems. Many times the changes you want to do goes back to the Conway's law conversation. You want to look at an org structure, look at the system as how they're implemented. So it's that big change. And historically, the point which Joel made around data was always hidden behind applications, correct? To access data, apps, and apps were the entry point to access data, and data didn't have its own identity. And now the entire need is, okay, apps are more composable, and at some point in time, I think the developers will no more start writing code. I think the way the world is moving, you'll end up becoming low code to no code and self code to assemble. But I think you'll have more coding on infrastructure and platforms and lesser on the application. You need a completely different skill process change. But that's the struggle customers go through, is that how do I get that whole piece? Let's take the latest example with SAP, correct? Got all the right moves, correct? S4, now with RISE, but there is a large chunk of customers sitting with very complex systems, self-created. It's not that someone told you to do that. You ended up doing things and adding a table here, inserting something there, sticking a few things behind, bad jobs, back-end entry into systems, and then you created this complex web. And then when you want to adopt cloud, you want to really become cloud native, the speed. There are certain fundamental things you need to walk that journey. So hence the large entangled web enterprises have a very different complex challenge. And I think data and industry processes are more closely aligned than applications. Applications can be more standardized. But when you take digital native businesses, we've got a lot of customers who are, because of our engineering heritage, a lot of in the R&D space, working with a lot of digital natives or soft, completely different strategy, because they have this green field, or like they sometimes have this culture to kill and rewrite, sometimes not keep cleaning things up, and they'll say, okay, let me junk it and maybe rewrite it, correct? The mindset shift is quite different. So I think that's the challenge in adopting a lot of rapid technology. I think people have to take tough decisions at some point in time and say, can I keep dragging the system along with me for as long as it goes? Or at some point in time, just decide to change this. But that doesn't mean old systems are not good systems. I think today, I strongly believe, and with a lot of our customers, we see, if you can even modernize your mainframe and run containers on the mainframe, because it's one of the most reliable systems around, actually. Most of our customers have realized that if I can modernize on the mainframe itself, I can drive far better value in my cloud native journey than trying to move off mainframe. So the logic that, okay, old is old and new is not there. It's about being relevant and making sure the systems and access are enabled. So that's the paradigm which we are seeing with our customers.
Yeah. So now you talked a lot about legacy dragons, cultural silos, right? That's what we also talk about, KK. And I wanted to ask you, Jason, I think one of the things that we've seen, really spice up is this POC culture, right? And especially in some of the technologies that you've been leading at IBM, like blockchain, right? Where practically everybody, let me throw some money and try this new thing out, right? Something called blockchain. And I think a lot of these POCs are like white elephants, right? They look beautiful, but are absolutely useless. right? And somebody yesterday called them piece of crap, right? And what's been your experience, when you look at some of these Horizon 2, Horizon 3 technologies, which might not be uh, completely mainstays right now, but this POC culture, um, what's your take on that?
Well, I liked your change on on that acronym, and I've even heard them call, instead of POCs, they're POIs, or, where there's no point where they really lead to a, a point of just total incompetence, and so it's because it's been pointed at the technology. And it's something great. And I'll hit, Joel, thanks for the IBM reference with Sam Palmisano, good friend and prior CEO. Uh, you know, whether it was Sam or you pick anyone who's been any of the team here would say, the only time we really get advancement in technology is when the end user sees value. And that's what we've seen across all of these technologies. Blockchain, one that I've led, but we can go into automation. I see Phil's face on the screen earlier. Phil and I were talking years ago about automation when it wasn't even, a big deal. And you say, well, what brought these things forward? And it's the value. The value isn't in that technology, it's in the outcome. And what's even more exciting that has changed that culture of POC and POI, as we joke, is that outcome, following this thought of the one office, that outcome is now a hyper-connected outcome that is not one that's where it's a push, but it's a pull, because you get value across an ecosystem, which plays into a lot of what I drive across the business now with regards to this ecosystem capability, where you have, and I'll briefly give an example so it's not just theoretical. You have a challenge in a pandemic environment where we had to get a vaccine in record time before for I think it was months, 4 years, needed to be shortened to 4 months. And so you had these manufacturers competing, so they had to change their back end systems. And then once that vaccine came out, it had to get to all of us so we could get a jab in the arm and get our appointments set and everything. So how does that work? What the challenge was in your POC? Well, we would have said, oh, let's try an experiment with a few ERP systems on the back end of the manufacturer. That would have been the siloed, and hope's not a method, but hope that it would have worked all the way through. Instead, the ecosystem came together, and we worked with Pfizer and SAP. SAP did some wonderful things behind the scenes with Pfizer, and the three of us worked together there on the back end, along with that supply chain. And then when it ultimately got to us as consumers, we worked with Salesforce to make sure that all of that came together. And guess what? In there was automation, wonderful ERP capability, and underlying that platform, multi-cloud platform, was blockchain. So all that stuff I just said, all those buzzwords and bright shining things, that's just because we're technologists here. I could have left it out and said, how many people here got a shot in record time? We would have raised our hands, whomever has done that. We said, how'd that happen? It was by not going by the siloed POC and looking at the outcome that brought together, thanks to the terminology of HFS, a hyper-connected capability.
Yeah, no, that's a great example of almost Horizon 3, which is actually real, right? That's happening right now. So thanks for that, Jason. And I think Mike Jason brought out a very interesting point of, the sort of the missing link between innovation and value, right? A lot of people want to drive innovation, but there is a disconnect between investing in innovation and actually creating meaningful value out of it. Where in your mind, is that disconnect?
Yeah, it's it becomes clear to me if math and statistics are our friend, right? And they're a powerful tool and an agent for us. And I think that often what happens in innovation programs, I have pretty strong opinions around this, is that it becomes an excuse to not deliver something, right? And a POC becomes a chance to create a piece of crap, right? And I think everybody, I agree with everybody's statements. I would kind of add on to it to say, here's the difference. If you take a program and, you know, math and statistics are our friend, and you say, okay, fine, you can create 9 pieces of crap, but you have to give me 1 home run. So you get 10 bats, and now you're on the hook to create something. You go out and you try 1, 2, 3 POCs, like the example that Jason had given, you know, yeah, your chances of success are low and not predictable. And if you get to a certain amount of swings of the bat, it becomes predictable. And that's the key thing to me in innovation programs is using math, using statistics, and using, you know, accountability to drive performance out of innovation programs. Personally, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm sure I will, and I often do. But I think the use of the word innovation in a title is crazy. Like, shouldn't that be everybody's job? Like, why would somebody have to be, you know, that's like, hey, I'm the chief, you know, I'm the chief breathing air officer of the company, right? Everybody should be doing that. And I think that's a problem in the culture. And I think there's a lot of ways around that. I love Joel's quote as well. That's a great one and a great leader. And I think that, you know, incenting is the right way. You know, using tools like gamification and viral network effects within your own organization are possible to make behavioral changes in your organization. So I just summarize it with, I think that, you know, any good innovation program needs to be accountable for producing results. And oftentimes that's missed, right? Because they stop at the hope part. And once you stop at the hope part, then you have no accountability from that point forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. So innovation needs to be accountable, right? Essentially. No, that's great. So I think we've been talking for the last 15, 20 minutes talking about the enterprise challenges, but let's look closer home, right, to our own services industry, the technology and business services industry. And, you know, when we ran this survey recently, practically everybody said that we are investing in cloud, as an example. You know, so let's assume that cloud becomes prevalent. That would mean that, you know, our traditional IT services become more standardized and more commoditized. You know, the relationships. The question then becomes, who owns the customer, right? Is it the system integrators, like the 3 of you, for example? Is it, you know, the hyperscalers, the AWS or Azure or Google, somebody else? How do you see this technology and business services, you know, third-party services change as a result of what's happening right now? And, you know, KK, would love to hear from you to start with.
Hey, Saurabh, so I think if you really look at cloud, I think it's a very, if you start to evaluate cloud, it's doing 3 fundamental things. It's changing the way you build, develop technology. It's changing the way you consume it. It's changing the way you operate, but it's also changing the way you do commercial structure of the whole model, correct? And if you really go back to the evolution of IT industry with IT services and IT OEMs, used to have hardware, software, and services, correct? And then you had, and from an HCL standpoint, we still look at 3, because we've got 3 unique businesses. We've got IT services, we've got R&D engineering, which is interestingly, cloud is touching that area. And then you have software products on its own. When I look at this, if you see the natural narrative, which you see in the IT services domain, oh, cloud is converging services, hardware, software. So is the hyperscaler my friend, or should I work with the cloud provider? The fact which we see is the industry is completely evolving with significant new opportunities. And one of the things which we've been trying to do is this whole ecosystem model, correct? So one of the things which we run is, we run ecosystems which cuts across all our service lines, because we believe cloud is everywhere. Cloud is going to modernize infrastructure, modernize applications, modernize our software products business, everything which you do in engineering, connected engineering, PLM, Industry 4.0, mechanical, med devices, aero, auto, everyone has a touch into the cloud. So cloudification happens all around. Now, the hyperscaler, I think we strongly believe, is markets are shifting towards an ecosystem operating model where you have orchestrators, different orchestrator at different points in time. There could be a customer who needs to exit the data center quickly. In that case, the current INO provider could be the orchestrator because they could migrate you off. Now the customer wants to modernize their business landscape and do something with SAP, wants to walk SAP S4 on RISE, and then you have someone else orchestrate it, correct? And I think Jason did point about an example of what it did with the vaccine management. There's not one, it's not the old mindset of prime sub, correct? Okay, I'm the prime SI, I will be the prime, everyone subs around, correct? It's about creating the right ecosystem, and which is where I look at hyperscalers. If the customer knows what they want, then it's very easy, they write RFPs, correct? And they say, okay, vendor A, vendor. When you have unarticulated needs, I think the market is going to go towards a collaborative, cohesive model, and everyone in the ecosystem have to create complementary and incremental value add. If you do the same thing what you did 5 years back, obviously someone is going to automate or someone is going to eradicate that entire role, correct? That's the evolution of technology, correct? So you have to incrementally find a way to evolve, correct? And find ways to help customers in that whole journey and make yourself relevant. So I think I see hyperscalers are very important. You have to have the right org structure and that operating model as a service provider to embrace that. Because hyperscalers want focus. Each one is deep, correct? We've created 4 hyperscaler units, correct? We've got one for IBM Red Hat, AWS, Google, and Microsoft, because it's deep. Each one is quite deep, and you need to build that and connect different parts of the organization. So you have to find the structure which works for you, which can accelerate this.
Yeah, no, that's a great point of looking at it from an ecosystem perspective versus, the traditional way that we've looked at it as outsourcing, which is a very one-to-one sort of a dimension. Jason, IBM has been very, very active, right? Since the Red Hat acquisition, now Kyndryl going out, the traditional IT infra business. Give us a little sneak peek on, where do you, see this this play out? Because, IBM is, the uniqueness about IBM is you are, on one hand, you're a hyperscaler itself, right, with Red Hat, but on the other hand, you're a, GBS service provider as well. So, and you are at the center of that because you lead strategic partnerships. So how does this all play out?
So I'll give you more than a sneak peek. Let's just pull the whole kimono back. That's why we're on this very close personal call right now, right? I'll give an example of, as KK said, when we joined, we were in a back room before we jumped into this. He said, Jason, I was just on the phone with one of your colleagues who takes care of ecosystems and who I work with on a daily basis. Well, guess what? Some would say, wait a second, you've got HCL and IBM, they compete. No, we collaborate. Oh, but yes, we do compete. I mean, I know a couple of deals where we're going head to head that I can't wait to catch up with KK after this one, talk about it and say, hey man. So this thought of how the muscle group that's there, it's less than a sneak peek, is it? Yes, of course there's a Red Hat acquisition and our mantra's open. And it provides that open capability. And I won't change up my stories. I'll stay consistent with the same story I told about going across multiple industries, public sector, into consumer, into each healthcare, life sciences, across that, and across countries, states in the US, governments. How do you do that? The only way you do, back to KK's point, is there's not one group that's going to be able to say, I'm going to do it by myself. There has to be, whether we're going to work with, in that solution, an AWS instance in Asia Pacific, and as we work our way west, find ourselves on Azure in the UK, and then on IBM Cloud in North America. someone has to pull that together, and it takes the teaming of it. And this is, I'll keep coming back to this extra, the hyper-connected enterprise is real, because that's what the market is expecting. If you walk through the door right now and start talking about, here's what I'm going to do with my one solution, that door you walked in is where you're going to be walking out very quickly. If I walk in with KK on one arm and my friends at Salesforce and SAP on the other arm with Azure with me, we're all going to sit around the room and say, okay, now how do we put this together for you quicker, better, faster? Might take a couple extra days, but you'll get a few extra capabilities that you didn't plan on because we came together quicker, better, faster. That is not the future. It's not a sneak peek. That's now. That's what open truly means.
You'll
And
be fresh.
just to add to this, and Saurabh, just one thing. This is real examples what he's talking about. We've got customers who said, hey, I love OpenShift, but I love Azure, correct? I love OpenShift, but I'm on AWS. In the old mindset was, oh, no, it's mine versus yours. Now, yeah, we find we want to do that. Same thing you're seeing with every other example, right? It's a simple, good example of how things are evolving. And this is happening, but I think we have to make it more scalable. Everyone has to acknowledge the fact that we're not competing. It's a cooperation world. We compete and we cooperate, and then we find a way.
And as KK said, this opens up the market. Think about the opposite when it's let's play KK off Jason. Let's go ahead and it shrinks the market. But when when KK and I are standing next to each other, they go, oh, okay. So now what? Well, instead of talking about how you shrink the scope, play with the pricing and all, it's how do we increase your outcome? How do we make sure you get not just the best value for your money, but the best outcomes, plural outcomes for your investments, plural. That's where it is now, not where it's going, but where it is now.
So it's really about the power of the and, not one versus the other, not or, but and. No, that's great. I wanted to bring Mike in and touch on another, a topic that we are very, very passionate about, which is talent. And there are multiple ways of looking at talent. Mike, and I think you're the best person to start addressing that, because, crowdsourcing, gig economy, that's a completely new alternative talent model that, the IT business services industry hasn't, adopted in a big way, in a huge way. And you've made a very successful business of it, right? So would love to hear your thoughts around, alternative talent models. And then also interrelated to that is what's happened over the last 12 months with this pandemic, right? And, and this work from home, work from anywhere culture that's going to be here with us to stay. How does that change the talent equation, right? I'm assuming that reduces the stranglehold that the Silicon Valley has had on technology innovation, and does it democratize it more? But would love to hear your thoughts, Mike, on the talent equation of technology.
Sure, thanks, Saurabh. Yeah, so I know it probably is new to a lot of people, but believe it or not, I had no gray hair when I started on this journey, so it's been a while. So, to me, there's points in time where we come up with new paradigms and new ways of doing things that work for all parties. And when we find those things, you gotta double down on those. And this on-demand talent paradigm is one of those. And I think it's so needed, right? We've been for so many years in a struggle of finding talent, entertaining talent, finding lower cost talent, finding, and it really did become, I would call it, a war on talent. And it never was really about the true underlying capacity that was available. It was the way to access it. And that to me is where this on-demand talent model comes into play. If you start thinking about, what if I can get access to the talent that I need when I need it with no latency, what could that do to my business, right? Maybe I have to change the way I work slightly in order to do that. I'll get back to the slightly. But what impact could that have to my business? And then you answer that question. If you come up with that, hey, this makes sense for me, then you go down about the path of figuring out how to do that, how to deploy talent in a way that's truly on demand. We've done it. We've transformed our own personal lives to now live, all of us. We live in a very on-demand economy in our personal lives, and we're very comfortable with it, and we will not go back, right? It is very nice to get your burrito at 2 a.m. when you want it, you know. You can have that in the enterprise as well. But here's the thing that people are not connecting the dots with. It's also better for the talent, right? It creates an environment where what you can produce and how fast you can produce it and the quality level which you can produce it determines what you're worth in this economy. That's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for people to get paid for the value they're creating. And if you think about everything we've been talking about today and the hyperscalers and this new paradigm and the whole shift to digital, you know what else it opens up? It opens us for a way to be able to track what people are doing inside environments like GitHub. How much of their code is running inside an AWS server? How many times is it getting hit? How many times does it produce an error? There's so many metrics that personally, I think we should start looking at the top software developers in these hyperscaler platforms, just like we look at the top athletes in our professional sports or the top artists in music, or you name the discipline. I think there's a way for us to really be able to celebrate those achievements of people and pay them what they're worth, right? And that's where I think there's an opportunity, and that's where I think there's an environment here where companies can get access to top on-demand talent, and top on-demand talent can find an unlimited source of opportunities to work on. And that creates a marketplace, and now we have to use market dynamics to manage it. It's efficient, it works for both sides. And I think we've kind of changed. So the thing that, to answer the second part of your question, the thing that's come into play, 2 years ago, my job was going into organizations, and I've probably worked with every company that's on this, Top Coders worked with every company on this list today. I've gone to organizations and tried to convince them which pieces of work could be formatted to fit an on-demand talent model. Okay, that requires a fair amount of change in mindset, a fair amount of change in how you manage a project. It requires a fair amount of change. It's challenging, it's difficult. We don't like change. The pandemic and this whole global work from home experiment forced us to change, okay? And now, here's the difference. It's not going and finding work that can fit an on-demand remote work model. It's now saying, hey, how can I have my on-demand remote workers show up and look just like your virtual remote workforce? That is completely different. That all of a sudden says, hey, I can do the normal boring stuff this way. Because you know what I've solved? I've solved for, I am solving for how to securely access resources, how to give them environments to be able to work on things in a secure way, how to trust who the person is on the other side of the Ethernet connection, right? How to trust the code that they're giving back, how to trust the code that you're giving them. Those mechanisms have been forced on us in the last 18 months. So now we can look at it differently. And that's why I think this opportunity for on-demand talent will just explode. I mean, it is exploding. It is exploding. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Oh, that's very helpful. I think the other somewhat of a taboo, but still very important question around talent is diversity, right? And let's be honest, right? Look at this panel. We are 5 middle-aged men talking about technology, right? Joel is laughing. Maybe he's not middle-aged, but how do we make this a more diverse environment? I think all of you guys, your companies have made commendable, improvements or investments in making it more inclusive and diverse. But we are still nowhere close to 50-50, right? If I'm not mistaken. Would love to hear, as leaders in your organization, and to the 1,000+ people who are listening in to this today, how do we make this more inclusive? Because I'm assuming the kind of challenges that we are facing, empathy, culture, those are things that we need diversity in thinking, diversity in all different kinds, race, religion, gender, all kinds of diversity. I would love to talk about that for 2 or 3 minutes if possible, and maybe KK, if you don't mind getting us started on that topic.
No, and I think this is a collective thing in the industry. If you really start to look at at least from an HCL standpoint, one thing which we've done is we are inherently making this the entire ESG along with the diversity and inclusion piece a core into the agenda. Start from our board itself. It's already becoming significantly diverse, and we've got more diversity in terms of ethical backgrounds, but also more female leadership, correct? And our chair board itself starts from there. So I think we've been building that diversity down there. There's a clear stated goal at every layer in the company to increase and give more D&I driven focus, both from hiring, recruitment, a lot of those pieces which you're trying to do. But I think we will have to create environments to be able to make sure that we are able to, so diversity and inclusion go on together. You can only make it diversity when you become more inclusive. You cannot say I'm diverse, but not. So I think you have to bring both of them together significantly, which means you have to create inclusivity in every part, the way your policies, your procedures, your culture, ability to understand differences, be able to provide more flexibility into every aspects, correct? And we've been trying to work towards that consistently. We've gone a decent level, but I think there's still more to do. And I think and there is a clear strive, and it has to be pushed top down or demonstrated top down, but it will only scale bottom up, which means you can show the way, but that thing going down, and some of the cultural aspects of the company, like we have employee first and some of those things, because we push the accountability down, that helps us to scale this up, but it's still, we have to walk the path more actually collectively as an industry. And I think everywhere we keep doing that, every bit we do, I think always add to the collective improvement. And I think that's where I really look at this.
Yeah. I would echo what KK saying, and I'll try and use some of the same words, KK, because that way it'll be consistent here, is that, and I'm first to default, I'll have to say that when we think about diversity and inclusivity and being inclusive, I happen to have the privilege of leading all of our veterans community globally, co-chair at IBM. So that's one group, which is the greatest group of intersectionality across all of our diverse talent, whether it be neurodiversity or by gender or by sex. And I also happen to have the privilege of leading our Black employees and mentors, BEAM as we call it, community globally in our services group. So that's two, and I sit at that intersectionality. So my comments and thoughts here are very biased, being privileged, being a company that thinks the way I do. And I would give it a thought of, if we look at each one of our companies, just call those companies a neighborhood, and think of all of us together as a community. And we're talking tech, so let's talk about the tech community. Each one of those neighborhoods in that community first has to take care of what they're doing, to KK's point, and that's tops down and bottoms up. Tops down, yes, we made a wonderful industry example with a prior CEO, another CEO and good friend, Jenny Romiti. And he said, look, and at the time she was like one of two at one point during her tenure of major CEOs. We said, well, we're going to do, that's tops down. Then we made a commitment bottoms up in what we call our Pathways Early Technology in high school, to say, how do we find challenge areas in high schools globally, not just in the US, and in partnership with other teams, to say, how do we make sure that we're infusing this diverse talent at the very beginning of the funnel, of the pipe? How do we make sure that it looks different, feels different than what we see day to day on this screen? That is an execution. And that's where all of us have the opportunity, and we're taking care of it in our neighborhood. But then we've also gone out, as I said, being inclusive as corporations, to make sure that the other neighborhoods, others on this screen, those neighborhoods are empowered to bring together a diverse community, tops down and bottom up. It looks good on paper, but only works in execution. And so it is on our backs, all of us, to make sure that the screen does look different as we move forward, because that is our responsibility based on where we all sit.
I do.
The other piece I would add to that, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry, Joel. Real quick, I do agree with it starts early, and I think it actually starts it starts prior to third grade. Like I see it in my own. I have 4 children. I see it in my own children, and when they're steered in different directions, just because that's what's culturally done, or that's where your parents are steering you, or your parents' experience. I actually volunteer for on the board of a Young Inventors program that targets third graders and below to get them into STEM. And we take an extra focus on getting girls into STEM because that's a problem. But I will just real quick on a platform perspective. So I love the fact that like the Top Coder platform, it has blind bias. Technically, it has blind bias. But the issue is not that. The issue is that even the data that we have, and think about how scary this is. We create AI. Our AI has bias built into it because the data has bias built into it. The historical data is flawed. It's a huge risk for us. I mean, it's unbelievably, it's very discouraging when you look at this topic. Our muscle memory has bias in it. And I think that's, those are the things that we really have to think about. How do we fix those? And how do we do this? It's going to take a lot of time. I agree with everybody saying this, but it starts at such an early age. And I think we have to really focus on this as a group. This isn't everyone's problem, right? This is not and I applaud you for bringing it up because it's a huge issue.
Mike, you totally stole my thunder there. I was going to talk about ethics and AI. And if we weren't having this juxtaposition right now of the importance of diversity and inclusion in our industry and across every other industries, as one of the speakers spoke yesterday, everything we do is creating data. And as that data gets pumped into AI to support the decisions individuals and teams are making, AI is going to play a larger and larger role. And having diverse views from your AI supporting you is going to be critical. So I completely agree with you, with Jason and KK. This is so important right now to embed this diversity, not only into the way we operate as people within organizations, but how our data supports us and is captured.
No, I think very, very pertinent to this conversation. I think a technology conversation can no longer be about technology only. That's the point that, fundamentally that's the mistake that we've been making, both as service providers, as enterprises, as analysts, all across the ecosystem. And we have to have a more robust, all-rounded conversation. Look, I wanted to have a little bit of fun now with all you guys, and wanted to play a little bit of buzzword bingo. And, there are so many buzzwords these days, when it comes to technology. And I just wanted to throw one buzzword out and, go through this virtual table and tell me what you think when this particular technology will become mainstream. Do you think it'll be in the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, more than 5 years, or you think it's just hype and it'll die its own death like multiple things do? So let's do this. Let's start with the thing that I talked about earlier, DeFi, decentralized finance. KK.
Will happen in 3 to 5 years.
Oh, so you're bullish on it. Okay.
I'm bullish on it.
Jason?
Equally as bullish. I'd even say a slightly different flavor, even 2 years.
Mike?
I'm going to stick with the group. I don't know that I'm educated enough to give a real answer to this, but I hope that it happens, and I'm going to support their opinions.
Joel?
I think it's happening now. I agree with KK and Jason. I believe in 2 to 3 years, we'll see it at scale. But I mean, DeFi and blockchain, it's happening right now. And I've seen examples from not just finance, but other industries really getting into how they're baking blockchain into the supply chain, whether it's funding from the UK government on its digital sandwich, or organizations like one here in Ottawa called Asset Compliance, which are looking at blockchain to do basically from mining all the way to finished product tracking. So, and then of course, Jason's a great example from earlier.
Yeah.
Just one point on this, Saurabh. If you just for the moment take blockchain out of the picture, this concept was implemented by Mohammed Yunus in Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, like 20 years back, a kind of micro lending for a part of this financing.
Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah, but the technology can make it more reliable, correct? It can make it non-repudiation, make sure transactions, the ledger technology will make sure that, but it's that's what I believe. It's just, but yeah, the fight is against the established institutions who may not like this.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about another technology, 5G. Let's go in the reverse order. Joe.
There's some great research. Mayank on our team is just putting out that I read all the POVs coming out and talking about how this is being embedded in industry. You know, it's not, you know, our 3Gs and 4Gs were more ubiquitous mobile networks. How this is being deployed in data centers and manufacturing organizations. So again, 5G's here. Again, scale. We're going to see this in scale in the next 2-3 years. It's pretty much part of how we work.
Mike?
I agree completely. I think it's within the next 2 years. I think it's a fundamental technology. I mean, it's almost like the emergence of the smartphone and how that changed our lives. And I think with how we've gone to remote working, things like AR cloud and stuff like that now becomes reality, right? Where your work life, you know, working from home, working from the office does not have to be two separate things. It can start to merge together. I think it's huge opportunities in the enterprise space and the personal space for 5G.
I'm with Joel on this now. I mean, it's happening, and I would say there's different flavors of it, because we as technologists on the phone go, oh, what do you mean when? It's now at scale and commonplace. I'm back out to the 2 years. It's always a safe bet. Say 24 months, people start to go, when did this happen? It's like it's been there.
Completely echo this. 5G is happening. As you modernize your network, you'll only do 5G networks. You'll not do any other network anyway, correct? So it's going to become ubiquitous. I think to Mike's point, and it's an enterprise, and Joel's point, enterprise, correct? That's where the big traffic play is going to come in with 5G. But I think it's the Gen Z, the new gen, they will anyway drive 5G kind of consumption traffic, even in the consumer world, correct? One area which I think is this whole Stadia type gaming, where you don't have the game console here, it's all damn on the cloud. And you want to completely do it on mobile. There is no other solution you have other than to go really 5G. So these new kids will find newer applications, AR, MR, and then all those pieces. Yeah. Completely with you.
That though, I completely agree with you. If you want to see technology innovation, look at the gaming industry. You know, and so I know my time is up, but I can't let you guys go before answering the same question for quantum computing. KK, we'll start with you.
No, I will be biased because I get involved in the GFC for WEF for quantum. I am a big believer in this because there is a spiritual angle to this. Actually, quantum computing is, you have to unlearn a lot of things. I think it's there, it will happen. It's pretty early stage, but it will grow exponentially because it will change the perspective of what you can do with computing, because it's no more a mathematical computer, it's a physics and a chemistry computer, correct? It's a completely the possible. I am very bullish on this because it can solve world problems. It's not because it can solve our technology problems, things around weather, things around climate, things around like this mRNA technology can really accelerate if you have quantum computing, because you can actually do such complex calculations. So I'm a big supporter in this, and I'm really bullish on. I hope thing reaches some stage.
So to put you on a spot, 2 years, 5 years?
I think it's still 5 years. For one reason, we are still back in assembly language equivalent, correct? Like the best example is IBM Q, correct? You can drag and drop circuit composers, and so it has to evolve. the technology is more complex. 5 years, because noisy intermediary will exist now, but I think NISQ systems will be in about 3 to 5 years reality.
Jason?
Same, and of course, makes reference to our technology. We believe that it is 5 years out at scale. We have use cases happening right now, 2 years with use cases where people are saying, how and where do I apply this? I think the outcome of the technology is so amazing that people are going, oh, I can do that. So now they're trying to figure out how they bring that together. Qubit speed, and for those that don't know quantum, qubit sounds cool, but that's just the unit of measure here that we're talking about. Look it up, learn more, and I think that is what's key here, is how fast can people learn about quantum computing so that we can get to that 2 to 5.
Mike?
Yeah, I think it's within 2 years. I think that I think it will be non-traditional rollout. We've been working on it for 3 years now in multiple flavors of quantum annealers, and we've gotten a community up to speed on how to code on those types of platforms. Math is your underlying needed skill set. I think that the use cases that are going to push it out there are predictive medicine. I think what we can do with predictive medicine with quantum is going to be incredible. I think it'll create a whole host of problems that every chief security officer is going to become painfully aware of over that period of time as well. But I think the spread of it are going to be through the companies like the large companies like IBM, but through university networks. I feel like that's going to be one of the ways that this really spreads and gives people, kind of a old school way to go to a place and have access to this technology for research that's meaningful. And that's where we'll start. And that'll be within the next 2 years. And we will start realizing the benefits of it.
Right. And Joel, we're out of time, but very quickly.
June 9th, 2025. And the impact will be overnight. And we'll be talking about it live here.
Hey, look, I think this was an awesome panel. Thank you so much, everyone, gentlemen, for joining in today and discussing various subjects. I think my takeaway from all of this is Horizon 3 is not some sci-fi that's years away. What we are hearing from these technologists out here is Horizon 3 is happening now. So I think the time to roll over your eyes when you hear some of these things is pretty much over. Start getting your hands dirty, start at least learning, because my fear is, 2 years down the line, you might have a oh crap moment. I wish I had done something about it. And I think let's not have that oh crap moment, and just read it up. It's fun. So thank you, gentlemen. Thanks everyone for joining in today. I really learned a lot. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you.